Why do some people walk into a room and instantly command respect while others struggle just to be heard? It's not luck. It's not talent. And it's definitely not something you're simply born with. It starts with something much deeper. It starts with how you think. Because the way you think shapes the way you speak, and the way you speak tells the world exactly who you believe you are. Winners don't just talk differently. They see the world differently. They believe differently. They show up differently. And here's the most important part. Anyone can learn it. So today, this isn't just a speech about sounding confident. This is about rewiring the way you see yourself so that when you speak, people don't just hear your words. They feel your conviction. Winners think with purpose, not doubt. That doesn't mean they never feel uncertainty. It means they don't allow uncertainty to control their direction. Most people wake up and immediately begin reacting to their fears, to other people's opinions, to past failures. Their thinking is shaped by hesitation. They ask themselves, what if I fail? Or what if I'm not good enough? And without realizing it, those questions begin to define their actions. Winners ask different questions. They ask, what matters most right now? And what can I do with what I have? That subtle shift changes everything. Purpose-driven thinking starts with clarity. When you know why you are doing something, your mind stops wandering into unnecessary doubt. Doubt thrives in confusion. When your goals are unclear, your brain fills the gap with fear. But when your purpose is strong, your thoughts become focused. You begin to filter decisions based on alignment rather than approval. You don't waste time trying to please everyone because you already know what you are trying to achieve. This doesn't eliminate challenges, but it gives those challenges meaning. Most people believe confidence comes first and action follows. In reality, it works the other way around. Winners act with purpose even when they don't feel fully confident. They don't wait to feel ready. They move forward because their thinking is anchored in something bigger than their fear. Doubt says, wait until you're perfect. Purpose says, start and grow along the way. That's why winners progress faster, not because they're more talented, but because they spend less time hesitating. There's also a discipline to purposeful thinking. It requires awareness. You have to notice when your mind begins drifting toward doubt. Thoughts like, I can't do this, or I'm not like them, may seem harmless, but repeated often enough, they become beliefs. Winners interrupt those patterns. They don't ignore reality, but they refuse to let negative assumptions go unquestioned. Instead of accepting doubt as truth, they challenge it. They replace it with direction. They remind themselves of what they're working toward and why it matters. Purposeful thinking also shapes how you interpret failure. When your mindset is driven by doubt, failure feels personal. It feels like proof that you're not capable. But when your thinking is guided by purpose, failure becomes feedback. It becomes part of the process. Winners don't avoid failure, they use it. They extract lessons from it because their focus is not on protecting their ego, but on improving their path. This allows them to stay consistent while others stop. Another difference lies in how winners approach opportunities. Doubt looks for reasons to say no. It focuses on risks, limitations, and what could go wrong. Purpose looks for reasons to say yes, or at least reasons to try. It focuses on growth potential and what could be learned. This doesn't mean winners are reckless. It means they evaluate decisions based on long-term value rather than short-term fear. They understand that every opportunity carries uncertainty, but they also recognize that avoiding risk guarantees stagnation. Your internal dialogue plays a powerful role here. The way you speak to yourself becomes the foundation for how you think. If your inner voice is constantly critical, it reinforces doubt. If it is constructive, it reinforces purpose. Winners develop the habit of speaking to themselves in a way that pushes them forward. They don't sugarcoat reality, but they also don't tear themselves down. They focus on solutions. They ask better questions. They keep their thinking aligned with their goals. Environment matters as well. The people you surround yourself with can either amplify doubt or strengthen purpose. If you are constantly around negativity, it becomes harder to maintain a purposeful mindset. Winners are intentional about their environment. They seek out people, ideas, and influences that challenge them to think bigger. They expose themselves to perspectives that reinforce growth rather than limitation. This doesn't happen by accident. It requires conscious effort. Purposeful thinking is not a one-time decision. It's a habit that needs to be practiced daily. Every situation presents a choice to think with doubt or to think with purpose. The more you choose purpose, the more natural it becomes. Over time, your default response shifts. You stop reacting impulsively and start responding intentionally. Your focus becomes sharper. Your actions become more consistent. And gradually, the results begin to reflect that shift in mindset. What makes this powerful is that it's available to anyone. It doesn't depend on where you start, what resources you have, or what your past looks like. It depends on the direction of your thinking. When you train your mind to prioritize purpose over doubt, you begin to operate differently. You make decisions faster. You recover from setbacks quicker. You speak with more clarity because your thoughts are no longer scattered. Your thinking becomes a tool instead of an obstacle. And when your thinking changes, everything else follows. Your words reflect your self-belief. Long before anyone evaluates your skills, your experience, or your results, they hear how you speak. And in those first few moments, something subtle but powerful happens. People don't just listen to your words, they interpret your confidence, your clarity, and your conviction. The way you communicate becomes a mirror of what you believe about yourself. Most people think communication is about vocabulary or fluency. They focus on sounding impressive, using complex words, or trying to match a certain image. But strong communication doesn't come from trying to sound smart. It comes from believing in what you're saying. When you truly believe in your ideas, your words become simple, direct, and impactful. There is no need to overcomplicate because clarity naturally replaces confusion. When self-belief is weak, it shows up immediately in language. You begin to soften your statements. You use phrases like, I think, maybe, or I'm not sure, but even when you actually know what you're talking about. These small additions might seem harmless, but they reduce the strength of your message. They signal hesitation. They make people question your certainty, even if your idea is strong. Over time, this pattern can shape how others perceive your capability. Winners are aware of this. They understand that words carry weight beyond their literal meaning. They choose language that reflects confidence, not arrogance, but clarity. Instead of saying, I'll try, they say, I will. Instead of saying, this might work, they say, this is the direction we should take. The difference is not just in wording, it's in belief. When you believe in your perspective, you don't feel the need to hide behind uncertainty. Self-belief also affects tone and delivery. It influences how fast or slow you speak, how often you pause, and how comfortable you are with silence. When you doubt yourself, you tend to rush. You try to get your words out quickly, as if you're afraid of being interrupted or challenged. You may avoid eye contact or lower your voice without realizing it. These behaviors are not random, they are signals of internal hesitation. On the other hand, when you trust yourself, your communication becomes more controlled. You are not in a hurry to prove anything. You take your time, you allow your words to land. You pause when necessary because you are not afraid of silence. That calmness creates authority. It makes people listen more carefully, not because you are louder, but because you are more certain. Another important aspect is consistency. When your words are aligned with your beliefs, your message becomes consistent across different situations. You don't change your stance depending on who you're talking to. You don't shrink your ideas to fit someone else's expectations. This doesn't mean you ignore feedback, but it means your core message remains steady. That consistency builds trust. People begin to rely on what you say because it doesn't fluctuate with pressure. Your word choices also influence how you see yourself. Communication is not only external, it is internal as well. The language you use in your thoughts shapes your identity. If you constantly tell yourself, I'm not good at this, or I always mess things up, those statements reinforce a negative self-image. Over time, they become automatic. They limit how you act because you begin to behave according to what you repeatedly tell yourself. Winners break this cycle by being intentional with their internal language. They don't ignore their weaknesses, but they frame them differently. Instead of saying, I can't do this, they say, I'm learning how to do this. Instead of saying, I failed, they say, I found what doesn't work. This shift may seem small, but it changes how the brain processes challenges. It keeps the focus on growth instead of limitation. There is also a connection between self, belief, and honesty in communication. When you lack confidence, you may feel the need to exaggerate or over-explain to gain approval. You might add unnecessary details or try to make your achievements sound bigger than they are. But this often backfires because people can sense inconsistency. When you believe in yourself, you don't need to inflate your story. You present facts as they are, and that authenticity makes your message stronger. Listening is another part of how your words reflect your belief. When you are insecure, you may focus more on what to say next rather than truly listening. You become preoccupied with your response. But when you are confident, you are more present. You listen carefully, not to react, but to understand. This allows you to respond more effectively because your words are based on clarity rather than impulse. Your communication style becomes a habit over time. The more you practice speaking with confidence and clarity, the more natural it feels. At first, it may require conscious effort. You may need to pause and think about how you phrase your sentences, but gradually it becomes automatic. Your default way of speaking begins to reflect strength instead of hesitation. This transformation doesn't require a dramatic change in personality. It doesn't require you to become louder or more extroverted. It requires alignment. When your thoughts, beliefs, and words are in sync, your communication becomes powerful without force. People don't just hear what you say, they feel the certainty behind it. And that certainty is what makes your words matter. Clarity creates confidence. Most people think confidence is something you either have or you don't. They see someone speaking boldly or taking decisive action and assume it comes from natural ability or personality. But confidence is not a personality trait. It is the result of understanding. When you are clear about what you want, what you believe, and what you need to do, your actions become more certain. Uncertainty fades, not because the situation changes, but because your thinking becomes focused. Lack of clarity is one of the biggest reasons people hesitate. When your goals are vague, your mind starts to wander. You begin to question everything. You overthink simple decisions. You delay action because you're not sure which direction is right. This creates a cycle where confusion leads to inaction, and inaction reinforces doubt. It feels like a lack of confidence, but at its core, it is a lack of clarity. Winners approach this differently. They invest time in understanding exactly what they are trying to achieve. They define their goals in a way that is specific and meaningful. Instead of saying, "I want to be successful," they ask, "What does success look like for me?" They break it down. They make it tangible. This level of clarity gives their mind something solid to focus on. It reduces the noise of unnecessary options and creates a sense of direction. Clarity also simplifies decision-making. When you know your priorities, decisions become easier because you have a standard to measure them against. You don't need to second-guess every choice. You ask yourself, does this align with where I'm going? If the answer is yes, you move forward. If the answer is no, you move on. This eliminates hesitation. It allows you to act quickly and with purpose, which others often interpret as confidence. Another important aspect is clarity in communication. When your thoughts are clear, your words become clear. You don't struggle to explain your ideas because you understand them deeply. You can express them in simple terms without losing meaning. This makes your communication more effective because people don't have to work hard to understand you. They can follow your message easily, and that creates trust. On the other hand, when your thinking is unclear, your communication becomes complicated. You may use too many words, repeat yourself, or jump between ideas without a clear structure. This doesn't just confuse others, it also affects how you feel about yourself. You begin to doubt your ability to express your thoughts, which further reduces your confidence. Clarity breaks this cycle by giving your mind a structured way to process and present information. Clarity also comes from preparation. Winners don't rely on improvisation for everything. They take the time to think through important situations in advance. They consider possible questions, challenges, and outcomes. This doesn't mean they try to control everything, but it means they reduce uncertainty where they can. When the moment arrives, they are not starting from zero. They already have a framework in place, which makes them more composed and confident. There is also clarity in understanding your strengths and limitations. Confidence does not mean believing you are good at everything. It means knowing where you are strong and where you need improvement. When you have this awareness, you stop pretending. You stop trying to cover up weaknesses with overconfidence. Instead, you focus on using your strengths effectively while working on your gaps. This creates a more stable form of confidence, one that is based on reality rather than illusion. Clarity helps you manage pressure as well. In stressful situations, the mind tends to become scattered. Thoughts race and it becomes harder to focus. But if you have clear priorities, you can bring your attention back to what matters. You can filter out distractions and stay grounded. This ability to remain focused under pressure is often seen as confidence, but it is actually the result of disciplined thinking. Another dimension of clarity is understanding your values. When you know what you stand for, you are less influenced by external opinions. You don't change your direction every time someone disagrees with you. You listen, you evaluate, but you remain anchored in your principles. This consistency strengthens your confidence because your decisions are not constantly shifting. You are guided by something stable. Clarity also reduces fear of judgment. A lot of hesitation comes from worrying about what others will think. But when you are clear about your intentions and your direction, that fear loses its power. You are not trying to impress everyone. You are focused on executing your plan. This shift in focus allows you to act more freely without being held back by unnecessary concerns. Building clarity is an ongoing process. It requires reflection. You have to regularly step back and evaluate your goals, your actions, and your progress. You have to ask yourself whether you are moving in the right direction or just staying busy. This habit of reflection sharpens your thinking over time. It helps you adjust when needed and stay aligned with your purpose. The more clarity you develop, the more your confidence grows naturally. You don't have to force it. You don't have to pretend. Your actions begin to reflect certainty because your mind is no longer divided. You know what you are doing and why you are doing it. That alignment creates a sense of control even in uncertain situations. And when you operate with that level of clarity, confidence becomes a byproduct of how you think and act. Speak to inspire, not to impress. Most people approach communication with the intention of being liked, approved, or admired. They choose words they think will make them sound intelligent or successful. They focus on how they are being perceived rather than what they are actually saying. This mindset creates pressure. It forces you to perform instead of connect. And when you are focused on impressing others, your message often loses its authenticity. Inspiration works differently. It is not about showing how good you are. It is about helping others see what is possible for themselves. When you speak to inspire, your focus shifts outward. You are not asking, how do I look? You are asking, what can they take from this? This change in intention transforms the way you communicate. Your words become more meaningful because they are driven by purpose, not ego. People can sense the difference. When someone is trying to impress, it often feels forced. There is a subtle tension in their delivery. They may use complex language, exaggerate their achievements, or try to dominate the conversation. But instead of feeling inspired, the listener feels disconnected. It becomes difficult to relate because the message is centered around the speaker, not the audience. When you speak to inspire, simplicity becomes your strength. You don't need complicated words to make an impact. You focus on clarity, honesty, and relevance. You share ideas in a way that others can understand and apply. You remove unnecessary details and highlight what truly matters. This makes your message more accessible, and as a result, more powerful. Storytelling plays an important role in inspiration. Facts inform, but stories connect. When you share experiences, challenges, and lessons, you give people something they can relate to. You make your message human. Instead of presenting yourself as perfect, you show growth. You show the process. This allows others to see themselves in your journey, which is far more inspiring than simply hearing about achievements. Vulnerability is another key element. Speaking to inspire requires a level of openness. It means being willing to share not just your successes, but also your struggles. This does not weaken your message, it strengthens it. When people see that you have faced difficulties and still moved forward, it builds trust. It makes your message believable. It shows that progress is possible. Even when things are not perfect, intentionality matters as well. Every word you choose should serve a purpose. When you are trying to impress, you may speak more than necessary, adding extra points just to sound knowledgeable. But when your goal is to inspire, you become more selective. You focus on delivering value. You think about what the listener truly needs to hear, not what will make you sound better. Listening becomes just as important as speaking. Inspiration is not a one-way process. It involves understanding the needs, concerns, and perspectives of others. When you listen carefully, you gain insight into what matters to your audience. This allows you to tailor your message in a way that resonates more deeply. You are not speaking in general terms, you are addressing real emotions and real situations. Energy and presence also play a role. When you speak to inspire, your energy is aligned with your message. You are engaged, focused, and genuine. You are not distracted by how you are being judged. This presence makes your communication more impactful. People are more likely to pay attention when they feel that you are fully invested in what you are saying. Another important aspect is consistency between your words and your actions. Inspiration does not come from words alone. It comes from credibility. If your actions do not match your message, people will notice. But when there is alignment, your words carry more weight. They are supported by evidence. This makes your message more convincing and more likely to influence others. Speaking to inspire also requires patience. Not every message will have an immediate impact. Sometimes the effect of your words will show up later. Someone may remember what you said days or even months after hearing it. This means you have to trust the process. You have to focus on delivering value without expecting instant recognition or validation. There is also a level of humility involved. When your goal is to inspire, you are not trying to position yourself above others. You are sharing ideas as part of a collective journey. You acknowledge that you are still learning, still growing. This creates a sense of connection rather than distance. People feel that you are speaking with them, not at them. Your tone becomes more inclusive. Instead of saying, "I achieved this," you might say, "This is what we can achieve." You invite others into the vision. You make them part of the message. This inclusion increases engagement because people feel involved rather than passive. Over time, this approach builds influence. Not the kind of influence based on status or authority, but the kind that comes from trust, and respect. People begin to value what you say because it consistently adds meaning. They listen not because they have to, but because they want to. And when your words consistently help others see possibilities, your voice becomes something people remember, not for how impressive it sounded, but for how it made them think and feel